I want you to think back to a time when you woke up from a dream and your heart was just absolutely pounding in your chest.
Oh, yeah. We all know that feeling.
Right, like you're sitting up in the dark and the actual details of the dream are already, starting to slip away.
They fade so fast.
Exactly. But what remains is this lingering, heavy, almost unexplainable emotion. It's like a residue coating your mind.
Yeah, it's totally visceral.
It really is. Maybe it was pure terror, or I don't know, maybe it was a profound sense of grief, or even this white hot anger that you just couldn't quite attach to anything in your waking life.
And usually, you just shake it off.
Right. You shake it off, you go get your morning coffee, and you try your hardest to forget it. But today's deep dive is taking the exact opposite approach.
We really are.
Because we are looking at something incredibly rare today. We have a document that pairs a viscerally disturbing, multi-layered nightmare with a rigorous professional clinical psychological report.
It's basically a full psychoanalytic breakdown.
Yeah, it breaks down what every single bizarre detail in this specific person's dream actually signifies mechanically in their brain.
And the clinical report we're working from, it treats the unconscious mind not just as a random image generator. It treats it as a deeply intentional master filmmaker.
I'm a master filmmaker. I like that.
Yeah, because the human brain, especially during REM sleep, it's attempting to metabolize stress.
Okay, metabolize it, like digesting it.
Exactly. When your waking ego refuses to look at a trauma, the unconscious mind constructs these elaborate, highly specific, and frankly, often terrifying scenarios to force the issue.
It forces you to pay attention.
Right. Every setting, every character, every tiny prop in the dream diary we're exploring today, it was meticulously chosen by the dreamer's own psyche.
To send an urgent message about their waking life.
Precisely. An undeniable message.
So our mission today is to act as psychological detectives alongside you, the listener. We're going to unpack the dense symbolism of this nightmare to really understand the immense pressure this dreamer's mind is under.
And we are talking about some really heavy, universal themes here.
Oh, absolutely. Generational trauma, the crushing weight of family expectations, and the terrifying explosive power of repressed anger.
Yeah, we're going to see how those abstract concepts manifest as literal monsters.
Monsters, ruined cities, physical traps in the mind. It's wild. So to start, we have to look at how the brain attempts to set up boundaries and, how it feels when those boundaries immediately begin to fail.
Which happens right at the beginning of the dream.
Right. The narrative starts in a setting that feels totally mundane. The dreamer is at a local park, supposedly looking after their sister's newly born baby while the parents get some alone time.
Sounds like a completely normal Saturday so far.
Totally normal. But then the dreamer starts digging into the dirt with this metal hook they just found on the ground. And they aren't just scratching the surface, they are unearthing all these bizarre objects.
So to understand the mechanism here, we really have to look through a Jungian lens.
Okay, Carl Jung.
Right. Jung proposed that the physical act of digging into the earth in a dream state is almost universally a metaphor. It represents the conscious ego attempting to access the unconscious mind.
So the ground is like the surface of our daily awareness.
Exactly. Taking a tool and breaking that surface means the dreamer is actively, albeit unconsciously, trying to uncover buried truths.
Or like lost potential or repressed memories.
Yeah. The brain is literally visualizing the process of introspection as an archaeological dig.
And at first, the dig seems pretty successful. The dreamer easily hooks these objects and pulls them up. They dig up what look like heavy, solid rocks.
I feel like they found something substantial.
Yeah, it's like panning for gold, thinking you've hit a massive nugget, and your heart just leaps, but then you wash it off and it turns out to be painted foam.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because when the dreamer pokes these rock-like objects, they realize they're actually just balloons shaped and painted like rocks. Or they find these inflatable pool toys and plastic boats, and the air just deflates out of them.
They become utterly useless.
Utterly useless. And the tactile nature of that disappointment, the report says that's a critical data point, right?
It is. Psychologically, those deflating rocks represent the dreamer's fragile defense mechanisms in the waking world.
Okay, so think about how we all build coping strategies.
Exactly. You might rely on a specific job title for your self-worth, or, I don't know, a rigid personal philosophy, or even a relationship that you believe is unconditionally supportive.
And to your waking mind, these things appear incredibly solid and reliable. They look like unyielding rock.
But the unconscious mind knows the truth. The dream is visualizing the horrifying realization that the moment these defenses are actually tested, the moment you really rely on them, they collapse.
They're just full of hot air.
Right. The psyche is warning the dreamer that their foundational support system is essentially an illusion.
The unconscious is basically saying, the armor you think you're wearing is made of paper? That is a terrifying baseline to establish.
It really is. It sets a very grim tone.
And the dream reinforces this fragility almost immediately with another interaction. The dreamer's older niece comes over and wants to play.
Right, the niece at the park.
Yeah. So the dreamer starts tearing up pieces of paper and cardboard into little trash balls, and they make a game of having the niece throw this quote-unquote trash into a small box.
And tearing up the paper, clinically speaking, is the mind's attempt to break down overwhelming, monolithic stressors into manageable, bite-sized pieces.
So it's a literal visualization of compartmentalization.
Exactly. When you feel overwhelmed at work and you decide to meticulously color code your inbox or aggressively organize your physical desk.
Oh, I totally do that.
We all do.
Yeah.
Your brain is doing exactly what the dreamer is doing with the paper. You're taking mental chaos, breaking it down, and throwing it into a specific box. It's a survival mechanism.
It's the brain trying to say, I can take my anxiety, my mental trash, and I can neatly put it away where it belongs.
But the compartmentalization fails in the dream.
It does. There's this highly specific moment where a piece of the torn paper misses the box. It falls right into the crack of an open door nearby.
Right, the crack in the door.
Yeah. And the dreamer points to it, and the little niece goes over, dutifully retrieves it, and puts it back in the box.
The crack in the door is the failure of the defense mechanism. Because a door represents a threshold, right? The boundary between the safe, controlled internal space and the unpredictable outside world.
So the crack is a tear in the dreamer's psychological boundaries.
Exactly. It proves that even when they're trying their absolute hardest to healthily compartmentalize their stress, the residue of their trauma still seeps out.
And the report points out that the entity retrieving it is vital here, the niece.
Yes. The niece, being a young child, represents the dreamer's own vulnerable inner child.
Okay, so the psychological interpretation is that this deeply buried anxiety is constantly slipping through the cracks of the adult's defenses.
Right. And it's being picked up and felt by the most defenseless, childlike part of the dreamer's psyche.
Man, that brings us to a fascinating question. What happens when a mind with cracked, failing defenses is suddenly subjected to intense external pressure?
Well, the dream answers that pretty violently.
Yeah, we don't have to guess.
Yeah.
Because the dream abruptly yanks us out of this quiet park and plunges us into a scene of absolute medical panic.
The tone shift is massive.
It really is.
Yeah.
The dreamer brings the newborn baby back to the house. Suddenly, the baby develops a fever and will not stop crying. Then, multiple female nurses invade the home.
And they aren't acting like normal nurses.
No. They aren't there to comfort the baby at all. They are furious. They immediately blame the dreamer, yelling about why they weren't called sooner, acting as if the dreamer has committed some grave, unforgivable sin.
This abrupt shift from the park to the invasion introduces the concept of the superego.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. Freudian psychoanalysis, right?
Right. In Freudian theory, the mind is divided into three parts. You have the id, which is our primal desires. You have the ego, which is our conscious self-navigating reality. And the superego, which is the internalized voice of societal rules, morality, and judgment.
Usually the superego is a good thing, right? It helps us function in society.
Usually, yes. But in a traumatized mind, the superego can become tyrannical. It stops being a moral compass and becomes an internal abuser.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Those angry nurses do not represent actual medical professionals. They are the dreamer's hypercritical superego personified.
That reframes the entire visual of what happens next, because what the nurses do to the baby is horrific.
It's incredibly hard to read.
They wrap the infant in nylon bags and tightly strap its entire body down with heavy belts, like they're securing it to an operating table. The baby is thrashing inside this cocoon, completely trapped.
Right.
So if the nurses are the superego, the internalized judgment, then who is the baby?
The baby represents the dreamer's ultimate vulnerable core. It is their true, unfiltered emotional self, their raw life force.
And tying the baby up.
Tying it up with nylon and belts symbolizes the total suffocating restriction of the dreamer's emotional autonomy. The unconscious is showing us the mechanical process of emotional suppression. The dreamer's most natural, vulnerable feelings are being forcibly restrained and pathologized by their own internal judgment.
So the message the brain is basically sending itself is, your natural feelings are a sickness, and they must be tied down so they cannot move or express themselves.
Exactly. And the saddest part is the dreamer's reaction.
Yeah, the dreamer actually wants to fight back against this. They want to yell at the nurses and defend the baby, but they look over at their mother.
Who was present in the room.
Right. And in the waking world, the mother apparently works in the medical field, but in the dream, the mother just watches the nurses strap the infant down, and she says absolutely nothing.
She just watches.
And seeing her silence, the dreamer decides to stay silent too.
We are witnessing the origin point of the trauma here.
The moment it all started.
Yeah, because children learn how to navigate the world by watching their primary caregivers, by watching the mother, the supposed protector, stay silent in the face of an abusive, invasive authority. The dreamer learns a tragic behavioral script.
They learn that submitting to oppressive power is the required response.
Exactly. They internalize a deep, unjust sense of guilt. The underlying logic the child's brain constructs is, if my mother isn't fighting for this baby, then the baby must deserve to be tied down.
Wow. And therefore, my own emotions must deserve to be suppressed.
It is the normalization of emotional suffocation.
And the dream shows us exactly how that normalized suffocation plays out in adulthood, because the location shifts entirely again.
To the hospital.
Yeah, the dreamer and the mother somehow travel to Tokyo. The dreamer falls ill with a fever mirroring the baby, by the way, and they end up at a place called the Suma Subame Hospital. And the clinical report actually dives into the linguistics of this name, right?
The linguistics are heavily loaded. Tsuma translates to wife, which in this context implies a sense of binding or being legally and socially tethered to someone's authority.
Okay, binding. And Subame.
Tsubame translates to a swallow, the bird. But in Japanese slang, it refers specifically to a younger male who is kept, controlled, or financially supported by an older woman.
So the hospital is literally named Bound Dependent Young Man.
Yeah, the unconscious isn't exactly subtle when it's desperate.
It really isn't. The brain is labeling the institution. The hospital signifies an authority structure whose entire purpose is to exploit the dreamer and keep them in a state of infantile dependency.
And we see the mechanics of this exploitation during the medical examination.
We really do. The doctor starts interrogating the dreamer. He asks if they've ever had a sexually transmitted disease. The dreamer admits that their very first sexual experience, which happened at an establishment in the red light district, resulted in an infection.
A very vulnerable admission.
And the doctor just blatantly mocks them. He laughs in their face. And the mother is right there in the room looking down at the floor with intense disappointment.
We have to introduce the concept of the shadow here.
The Jungian shadow.
Right. Jung described the shadow as the part of the unconscious mind consisting of repressed weaknesses, shortcomings, and instincts. It's everything about ourselves that we deem unacceptable or shameful.
So exposing one's first sexual experience, especially one tied to a commercial transaction and an infection, that is the ultimate exposure of the shadow.
Precisely. To have a medical authority, a figure whose evolutionary and societal role is to offer objective care, mock this vulnerability is a profound psychological violation.
It amplifies the dreamer's intense shame regarding their own adult independence.
And the mother's disappointed gaze reinforces the belief that the dreamer's transition into adulthood is a source of disgust for the family system.
You know, I want to push back on the next piece of the clinical analysis because it gets very Freudian, very fast.
Let's hear it.
So the doctor asks about any other injuries. The dreamer mentions an old injury to a finger on their right hand that required surgery.
Right, the finger injury.
The doctor immediately weaponizes this. He tells the dreamer they must travel cross-country every single Sunday afternoon to come back to this specific Tokyo hospital for ongoing treatment.
A ridiculous demand.
Completely. And when the dreamer protests that this is geographically and financially impossible, the doctor threatens to forcibly hospitalize them. Now, the report calls this finger injury a symbol of castration anxiety.
It does.
I have to be honest, Freud saw castration anxiety everywhere. A cigar is never just a cigar with him. Couldn't a broken finger just represent a literal past trauma or a fear of losing dexterity? Why do psychoanalysts jump straight to castration?
It's a really fair critique of classic psychoanalysis, but we have to look at what castration anxiety actually means in a modern clinical context.
Okay, what does it mean today?
It isn't strictly about literal anatomy. It is a metaphor for the absolute loss of agency, power, and autonomy. The finger is an extremity, right? It's a tool used to manipulate the world, to grasp things, to build.
Ugh.
An injury to it symbolizes a fundamental wound to the dreamer's ability to exert control over their own life.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
The doctor is taking a past physical vulnerability and using it to demand an impossible level of compliance.
So the psychological trap being mapped out here is, because you were once broken, you are permanently flawed. Therefore, you belong to the system, and you must sacrifice your time, your money, and your freedom to prove your compliance.
Exactly. It's an extortion of the ego.
Well, the dreamer realizes the whole hospital is a scam designed to diagnose people with fake illnesses to keep them trapped. So they grab their mother, and they flee out into the pitch-black Tokyo night.
A literal flight response.
Right. And this brings us to a critical junction. What happens when escaping a physical trap only leads to a deeper psychological betrayal? Because out in the dark city, the dynamic between the dreamer and the mother violently shifts.
Up until this point, the dreamer and the mother have operated as a unit. Even when the mother was silent or disappointed, they were tethered together.
But the darkness of the city changes that.
The darkness represents the unknown, unmapped territory of the unconscious. And in this unmapped space, the dreamer loses their anchor.
Yeah, the dreamer is running behind the mother, but the mother is sprinting. And she isn't just running straight ahead to escape. She's zigzagging, doubling back, running in erratic patterns.
Very disorienting.
And the dreamer can barely move their legs. It's that classic, terrifying sleep paralysis feeling where you're trying to run through molasses.
Right, your legs just won't work.
The dreamer begs her to slow down. They actually call out and say, let's just go to a pub, let's grab a drink and relax, we're on vacation. But the mother ignores it and just keeps sprinting away.
We can look at the physical sensation first. That feeling of not being able to run is the literal neurobiology of REM sleep. Your body paralyzes itself so you don't act out your dreams, and that leaks into the dream narrative.
Oh, that's fascinating. So the brain is interpreting its own paralysis.
Exactly. Psychologically, the brain interprets that physiological paralysis as profound emotional helplessness and a terror of abandonment.
And the mother's erratic running.
The mother's zigzagging run is the visual manifestation of an unpredictable, unstable caregiver. She is impossible to track, impossible to predict, and therefore impossible to rely on for safety.
Think about a time you tried to have a serious, heartfelt conversation with someone who keeps changing the subject, or looking at their phone, or literally walking out of the room.
It's maddening.
It's an emotional disconnect that you physically cannot bridge no matter how hard you try. That waking life frustration is what the dreamer is experiencing on a catastrophic survival level scale in the dream.
And the pub request is so specific, too.
Yeah, why a pub?
A pub is a space for adults. By suggesting this, the dreamer is desperately asking the mother for a peer-to-peer adult relationship.
They're essentially saying, can we stop this frantic parent-child dynamic of chasing and fleeing? Can we just sit down as two grown human beings and connect?
Right. And the mother's refusal to even acknowledge this request signifies a complete rejection of that adult relationship. The maternal fuss refuses to recognize the dreamer as an independent, equal entity.
Instead, she leads them into a small hill in the middle of the city where this strange, small woman is waiting.
The handoff.
Yeah. The woman looks scared and asks the mother for proof of identity. The mother casually pulls out her smartphone, shows the woman a digital reservation ticket, and the woman seems relieved and says, okay, let's go.
It's so transactional.
It really is. As soon as that transaction happens, the environment shatters. They are no longer in Tokyo. They are suddenly in a place the dreamer describes as a muddy, ruined, developing world city, like somewhere in Africa or Cambodia.
This sequence requires an understanding of the Great Mother archetype, which is central to Jungian psychology.
The Great Mother.
Yes. The Great Mother is a dual-natured entity deeply embedded in human mythology and our collective unconscious. On one side, she is the nurturing, life-giving protector.
And the other side.
On the other side, she is the devouring, destructive force. Think of deities like Kali that consumes her young to maintain her own power or avoid abandonment.
And the mother handing over a literal reservation ticket proves this wasn't an accident. She booked this. She planned the handover.
The transaction is a psychological murder of the dreamer's independence. It is the devouring aspect of the Great Mother archetype in full effect.
By trading her child away to this institution, she ensures that the dreamer remains a captive, helpless entity.
She is outsourcing the control she held over him to an even more brutal, unfeeling system.
And the brain immediately changes the environment to reflect that internal devastation. The neon lights and structure of Tokyo are gone. Now it's mud, puddles, ruined buildings. It has this post-war apocalyptic vibe.
The environment is a direct projection of the dreamer's internal state.
So the mud represents instability.
Right. Mud is unstable. Ruins are the remains of destroyed structures. This visual represents the dreamer's depleted mental energy. Their inner world has been devastated by this fundamental betrayal.
The foundation of their reality is literally turning to muck beneath their feet.
They have been stripped of the modern, structured world and plunged into the chaotic, primal territory of their deepest psychological fears.
The mother literally says, "Please take care of my son," and abandons them. And the dreamer is forced into this bizarre new prison, taking us deeper into the actual architecture of their trauma.
And it's a very uniquely designed prison.
Because the building they are taken to isn't a dungeon, it's a ruined 6-story pink building. Outside this pink prison, there's a gateway barely wide enough for a vehicle. An African driver in a pink bus is endlessly backing the bus into the gate, pulling it forward and backing it in again, over and over.
We really have to decode the color pink here.
Yeah, why pink?
In color psychology and dream analysis, pink is heavily associated with maternal love, warmth, softness, and the womb. But here, the pink building is rotting, filthy, and fallen apart.
So it's a corrupted symbol.
Exactly. It represents a dysfunctional family dynamic. It's a psychological structure built on the societal promise of maternal love. But in reality, it operates as a decaying prison.
It tells us that the dreamer's experience of family care is actually something that traps and degrades them.
And the bus backing up endlessly.
Man, I feel exhausted just picturing that.
That repetition, the backing up, pulling forward, backing up again in a space that is too tight, is the visual embodiment of a regressive psychological loop.
Like being stuck in a rut you can't get out of.
Yes. Have you ever felt stuck in a toxic job or a bad relationship where you are expending massive amounts of energy just trying to maneuver through a space that is fundamentally not built for you?
Oh, absolutely. You make zero forward progress. You just repeat the same stressful motions every day.
The dreamer's brain is visualizing that exact feeling of being trapped in a cycle they cannot break out of.
And it gets worse inside the biddle. The dreamer is shown to their room, and they are told they have to stay there for 4 years. The room is filthy, the floor is gritty, and all over the space there are the clothes and belongings of past residents just left to rot.
If a room represents the mind, which it almost always does in dream analysis, then this filthy room reflects a total collapse of self-worth.
And the belongings.
The unresolved belongings of the past residents represent unprocessed emotional debris. The dreamer is being forced to live among the ghosts of past traumas.
It is a psychological space that has never been cleaned out, organized, or healed.
And then they meet their roommate.
Yeah, they meet their guardian and their roommate. The guardian is that same small woman who took the reservation ticket. She has the face of a beautiful, mature adult woman, but she is only 100 centimeters tall, so about 3 feet. And she tells the dreamer to be quiet because there's a roommate behind the sliding paper door. When the dreamer asks who it is, they are introduced to a hamster, a literal hamster in a cage.
A very potent symbol.
The dreamer sarcastically says, "So I'm living with a rat," and the guardian just nods.
A hamster is the ultimate symbol of ego degradation.
Why a hamster specifically?
Think about the life of a domesticated hamster. It's a small, powerless rodent kept in a cage, running endlessly on a wheel but going absolutely nowhere.
Oh, wow.
It exists entirely at the mercy of whoever feeds it, completely stripped of its natural instincts. That is exactly how the dreamer feels in their waking life. Their self-image has been reduced to a helpless captive running on a wheel.
But the interaction with the 3-foot-tall guardian is what really confused me.
The affection part.
Yeah. Despite being trapped in this filthy room with a hamster, the dreamer starts to feel this intense, overwhelming affection for the guardian. They reach out, stroke her hair, call her beautiful, and ask why someone so lovely is working in a place like this. Why would anyone feel affection for their jailer?
This brings us to the psychological mechanism of transference, and it's deeply influenced here by the concept of the anima.
Transference, like in therapy.
Exactly. In clinical therapy, transference occurs when a person redirects some of their feelings or desires for another person to an entirely different person, often a therapist, or in cases of trauma, a captor.
So kind of like Stockholm Syndrome.
Very similar mechanisms. The dreamer is in an environment of total sensory and emotional deprivation. They are starving for affection and safety.
And because they are completely dependent on the guardian for survival, their brain subconsciously projects a desperate need for love onto her.
It's a tragic survival mechanism. Now look at the physical form of the guardian. She is the size of a toddler with an adult woman's
Which
face.
is very unsettling.
Jung called the inner feminine figure in the male psyche the anima. But this anima is distorted. The proportion represents a frozen childhood perspective of an adult authority figure.
Because to a small child, a mother is an absolute giant. Beautiful, terrifying, holding the power of life and death.
Precisely. The dreamer is regressing to that infantile state, trying to charm the jailer because they have no other means of defense.
But this desperate peace they try to make is about to be shattered by a single realization.
The missing phone.
Right. The dreamer reaches for their smartphone, the one they had in Tokyo, the one the mother had given them a charger for. They realize the phone is gone. The charger is gone. The psychological analysis zeroes in on this. Why is a missing phone the catalyst for the entire dream exploding?
Because a smartphone in a modern dream is the ultimate symbol of connection, identity, and tethering to external reality.
It's the umbilical cord to the outside world.
Exactly. When the phone is gone, the dreamer realizes that the isolation is absolute. The illusion of safety evaporates. The brain registers that there is no rescue coming.
And when that realization hits, all the repressed anger that has been building since the beginning of the dream, since the baby was tied up, since the mother ran away in Tokyo, since the hamster cage, it all finally detonates.
And the target of that detonation is very revealing.
It detonates directly at the mother. The mother is suddenly there trying to get on a bus to leave the facility. The dreamer just erupts. They scream at her, using incredibly vile language, delivering this devastating accusation.
What exactly do they say?
The dreamer yells, "You made kids just to make them sick. All four of us have mental illness. You wrapped our mouths and bodies in aluminum, made us swallow it, and the youngest died. You're a murderer."
It's brutal.
This monologue is horrifying. You made kids to make them sick. What is the brain actually processing here?
This is the beating heart of the clinical report. This is the moment of piercing clarity where the dreamer's profound awareness of generational trauma breaks through the surface.
They are finally seeing it clearly.
The dreamer is recognizing, on an unconscious level, that the children in this family system were not raised to be independent humans. They were used as tools.
Tools for what?
In deeply dysfunctional family structures, children are often subconsciously conditioned to serve the narcissistic needs of the parents, or to act as stabilizing shock absorbers for the family's chaos.
So the dreamer is stating that the mental illness of all four siblings isn't a genetic coincidence or a random tragedy. It is the direct manufactured result of the parenting they received.
Right. It's an indictment of the entire family system.
I want to focus on the material the dreamer specifically mentions here, aluminum. You wrapped our mouths and bodies in aluminum and made us swallow it. Normally, we think of aluminum as useful, right? It's shiny, it's protective, we wrap our leftovers in it to keep them safe. Why is the brain using aluminum as a murder weapon in this dream?
The clinical report spends significant time analyzing the aluminum. It represents a psychological phenomenon known as the double bind.
The double bind, what's that?
The double bind theory, developed by Gregory Bateson, describes a situation where a person receives two or more conflicting messages, where one message negates the other.
So it creates a situation where the person cannot win and they cannot even comment on the contradiction.
Exactly.
But how does aluminum represent that contradictory communication?
Because aluminum is pliable and associated with domestic protection, yes. But fundamentally, it is a cold, sterile, metallic barrier. It cuts off oxygen.
Oh, I see.
If you wrap someone's mouth in it, you silence them under the guise of protecting them. If you wrap their body in it, you destroy their personal boundaries while claiming to keep them safe.
It is psychological abuse perfectly disguised as care. I'm wrapping you up to protect you, but I'm actually suffocating you.
And forcing the children to swallow the aluminum means forcing them to internalize that toxic care, poisoning their internal reality.
When the dreamer screams that the mother is a murderer, they're verbally destroying her image.
Yes. And while it is violent, it is a clinically necessary step in what Jung called the individuation process.
Individuation?
It's the lifelong process of becoming your own separate whole person. To truly separate from a toxic family system, an individual often has to metaphorically kill the internalized image of the perfect infallible parent.
So screaming this truth, breaking that ultimate familial taboo that is the dreamer attempting a massive, desperate psychological separation.
But as the dream shows us, it doesn't quite work.
No, this massive release of repressed anger doesn't bring catharsis at all. The mother cries and walks away, but right after the dreamer screams at her, the entire environment turns hostile.
Through retaliation.
Yeah, the other patients in the facility, both Japanese and African, turn on the dreamer. They start to attack en masse, but the dreamer doesn't cower. The pendulum of their mind swings to the absolute opposite extreme.
We are about to witness the mind's ultimate final defense mechanism when the ego is facing annihilation.
The dreamer suddenly possesses immense superhuman martial arts skills. They transform. The dream diary literally describes them looking and sounding like Goku from the anime Dragon Ball.
Right, a total power fantasy.
They unleash lightning-fast punches, screaming in this high-pitched battle cry, devastating everyone in their path. They are slamming people through tables, knocking out dozens of attackers without taking a single hit.
Very cinematic.
Honestly, reading it, it sounds like an incredible action movie sequence. It sounds empowering. But psychologically speaking, becoming a Super Saiyan in your dream isn't actually a victory, is it?
Not at all. It feels like a rush of power, but clinically, this is the defense mechanism of hypercompensation operating at its absolute maximum red line limit.
Hypercompensation.
Alfred Adler, the founder of individual psychology, studied how feelings of inferiority drive human behavior. When an individual feels deeply inferior or powerless, they attempt to compensate.
So hypercompensation is when you overreact to feeling weak.
Precisely. Let's trace the arc of the dreamer's ego through this dream. First, they felt like a baby strapped down with heavy belts.
Then, a dependent young man blackmailed by a doctor.
Then, an abandoned child in a muddy city.
Finally, a hamster in a dirty cage.
Right. The ego has been pushed, crushed, and degraded to the absolute brink of non-existence. When a human mind feels that utterly powerless and cornered, it cannot sustain the reality.
It has to do something to survive.
To prevent a total psychotic break, the brain reacts by swinging violently to the opposite extreme, a fantasy of absolute, violent omnipotence. Becoming an unstoppable anime character is the psyche throwing up an impenetrable, delusional shield to protect the fragile core from shattering entirely.
Have you ever been backed into a corner in an argument, feeling completely misunderstood and powerless, and suddenly you just explode with rage, saying things you don't even mean just to assert dominance?
We've all been there.
That is hypercompensation. But as the dream shows us, that kind of absolute power isolates you completely, because after this massive brawl, the dreamer bursts out of the pink building and escapes to a vast, ruined plaza.
And the scene there is very telling.
It looks like it belongs in medieval Europe after a massive war. There are thousands of people there, but they aren't cheering for the hero who just beat up the bad guys. They are fleeing in absolute terror as if a natural disaster has just hit. They're running from the dreamer.
This is where the profound tragedy of hypercompensation is laid bare. Let's decode the geography here. The ruined European-style plaza represents the dreamer's broader psychological and social network.
It is the civilized, structured part of their mind.
But it is devastated. The fleeing crowd represents the dreamer's deep, underlying terror regarding their own repressed anger.
The brain is visualizing a terrifying hypothesis.
Exactly. If I ever actually let my repressed rage out, it won't just protect me. It will be so monstrous that it will destroy all my human connections. I will become a monster.
And that fear of being a monster is made agonizingly clear in the next moment. As the massive crowd is running away, the dreamer spots 3 hometown friends in the mob.
Real-world connection.
The dreamer's voice suddenly amplifies like a loudspeaker, echoing across the entire plaza, and they plead with them. "I did nothing wrong. Please understand me. Play with me again."
Such a heartbreaking line.
But the friends just cower. They laugh like a nervous, terrified laugh and run away.
That plea is the desperate cry of the healthy social self. The part of the dreamer that just wants connection, friendship, and normalcy is trapped inside this terrifying, rage-fueled exterior.
The friends represent the dreamer's own capacity for healthy socialization.
Right. The fact that they run away terrified shows that the dreamer fundamentally believes their anger makes them unlovable and totally alien to normal society.
The ultimate tragedy of absolute power is absolute isolation.
It truly is.
They finally have the power to defend themselves, but it costs them their humanity. And the worst part is the power doesn't even last. Eventually, an organized African military force arrives at the
The
plaza.
authorities step in.
They surround the dreamer, and movie villain power trip just ends. The military effortlessly subdues them.
Which proves a harsh psychological reality. Individual, chaotic rage, the cannot defeat the crushing weight of systemic societal order, the superego.
The military represents the ultimate unfeeling authority.
The dreamer's hypercompensation fails against the sheer gravity of the real world's rules, leading directly to the ultimate punishment.
And the punishment brings us to the final, most chilling image of the entire dream. The military hauls the dreamer back to the hospital, but they don't put them in a room or a cell.
No, it's much more specific than that.
They force the dreamer into a retro, canvas-covered aluminum canteen bag, like a vintage military water bottle. They force them inside, zip it up, lock it with heavy belts and actual keys, and sentence them to over a decade of isolation inside this thing.
We have to focus on the specific material of this prison. It is a canteen lined with aluminum.
Oh, wow.
The terrifying irony here is the mechanism of internalized abuse.
Oh.
The dreamer is sealed inside the exact same material they just accused their mother of using to suffocate them.
That is incredibly dark. They screamed that the mother wrapped them in aluminum to poison them, and now the authority figure is permanently locking them in an aluminum bag.
It means that despite the dreamer's violent, superhuman attempt to break free, they have ultimately internalized the abuser's methods. The punishment is a dark, twisted version of regressing to the womb.
But instead of a warm, nurturing mother, it is a cold metal coffin.
The aluminum, which was the poison of the mother's toxic love, has now become the dreamer's permanent, inescapable physical reality. The cycle of trauma has successfully enclosed itself.
There's a specific detail in this final sequence that gave me actual chills. As the dreamer is being shoved into this canteen, they say they are watching it happen to themselves from the outside.
To dissociation.
They are hovering in the air, watching their own physical body get locked inside this metal bottle and carried down a dark, dirty hospital hallway by the soldiers.
That visual of watching oneself from the outside is a textbook neurological description of dissociation. Specifically, it represents dissociative apathy during a traumatic event.
Dissociative apathy. What triggers that?
When the mind and the central nervous system can no longer bear the intensity of a trauma, when the fight-or-flight response has completely failed and there is no escape, the brain pulls the emergency ripcord.
To survive the unbearable reality of being permanently trapped, consciousness detaches from the physical body.
It's like a profound defense mechanism where the brain says, this is happening, but it isn't happening to me.
And that is exactly when the dreamer wakes up. But they don't wake up screaming in fear. They wake up furious. They are muttering aloud to themselves in their actual bed, in the real world, saying, "Don't mess with me, don't screw with me."
The fact that the emotion of anger successfully bridges the gap from the dream state into the waking world is crucial for the clinical diagnosis.
Because it proves it's real anger, not just dream anger.
Exactly. When you wake up from a dream and the emotion persists, it is called an amygdala hijack. It proves that this entire elaborate dream wasn't just the brain passively filing away old, stale memories from childhood.
It's active.
It is a reflection of chronic, unresolved, highly active stress that is currently operating in the dreamer's waking life. The engine of their anger is running red hot right now, today.
So what does the clinical report actually suggest they do? Because you cannot just walk around with that kind of pressure building inside your nervous system. You will eventually explode, or your body will simply break down.
The report's final clinical advice is highly practical, but incredibly challenging to execute. First, the dreamer must cognitively recognize that their lifelong strategy of being the good, silent child, like they were with the baby and the nurses, is actively destroying them.
They have to learn the mechanics of establishing healthy boundaries.
They have to learn how to say no to unreasonable demands in their waking life without feeling like they have to turn into a violent, hypercompensating monster to enforce that no.
They have to find the middle ground between absolute silence and a nuclear explosion.
Precisely. And most importantly, they need to seek professional therapeutic help to process this overwhelming generational anger. Because right now, their own anger is terrifying them so deeply that their psyche is locking them in an emotional canteen just to contain it.
It is an absolutely staggering journey. From trying to organize stress into little trash balls in a quiet park, to watching an infant get strapped down by judgment, to fleeing through a pitch-black Tokyo, to raging with superhuman power in a ruined pink prison, and finally ending up dissociated and locked in an aluminum water bottle.
It's a true odyssey of the unconscious.
It's incredible how our unconscious mind will construct these elaborate, terrifying, cinematic masterpieces. It pulls from every corner of our memory, mythology, and imagination, utilizing complex psychological mechanisms, all just to force us to look at the pain we are trying to ignore in our daily lives.
It's the psyche desperately, frantically trying to heal itself, even if the medicine it prescribes tastes like a nightmare.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought, one that builds directly on the psychological analysis we just spent an hour exploring. The clinical report suggests that the dreamer needs to reframe that terrifying final image of the aluminum canteen bag.
A cognitive reframe.
Exactly. Yes, in the dream, it felt like a permanent, suffocating prison. But what if we shifted the perspective?
What if it's not a prison?
What if we all, occasionally, need to view our periods of intense isolation, our periods of emotional lockdown, not as a permanent punishment, but as a necessary protective incubation?
Like a cocoon.
When the world is too chaotic, when the demands are too high, and when our anger is too raw, maybe we need to retreat. Maybe that aluminum bag is a tough, metallic cocoon. It's cold, it's restrictive, and it's dark. But it is keeping the elements out.
It gives you space to heal.
It is holding us together when we feel like our ego is literally shattering. And maybe the goal isn't to be terrified of the cocoon, but to rest inside it, process the trauma, and wait just until we are strong enough to break out of it under our own power and on our own terms.
That's a very powerful way to look at it.
So think about your own life. What is your aluminum bag right now? What are the boundaries or walls you've built around yourself to survive? And most importantly, take a hard look at them. Are they currently trapping you, or are they protecting you? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the mind. Keep digging, keep questioning, and we'll talk to you next time.